Welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where two fans and two non-fans talk about controversial and noteworthy comic books. And it's a special crossover extravaganza.
Not one of these forced things by editorial.
Yeah, Crisis on Infinite Flying Machines or something.
So for the July Patreon drive, we're trying to hype up the Patreon. So we have a special guest, and I guess we'll introduce ourselves first. I'm Ryan.
I'm Phil.
I'm Darryl.
And today we have Nick Wood from Stranger
Hello.
Still.
That's
Wow.
me.
Wow.
So you're replacing Sly?
Yeah, I murdered him and shoved him in my closet, and you'll never hear from him again.
You know what? That is something Sly would do to someone. So you are a good Sly.
I think the most likely person to murder Sly and shove him in a closet is Sly. So now we took this editorially mandated crossover event, and
We're trying to sell more toys.
we're turning it on its head, where we're subverting the trope, where we're supposed to do a crossover with Stranger Still, but instead we're kind of doing a crossover with your show that's not on the network, Nick.
It is, but it's also just because I have a sheer obsession with Scooby-Doo that pretty much defines any personality traits that I seem to have.
What does that? Do you mean like you were a blank slate and then you watched the show and you started to adapt to like all the characters on screen?
Yeah, so anytime
okay.
someone's like, "Man, you're so funny," which like one person has ever said to me, it's because of Scooby-Doo. Everything I say is a direct quote from Scooby-Doo, including this.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. So if you haven't gotten the hint, we are going to be doing a Scooby-Doo comic, but not just any Scooby-Doo comic. We're going to be covering Scooby Apocalypse, issues 1 through 6, by Keith Giffen, J.M.D. Mateus, and Howard Porter. And this is, if you remember our Flintstones episode, this was launched at right around the same time. This was the only ongoing. All the other Hanna-Barbera books were like miniseries or maxi series, but this one was an ongoing that actually just wrapped up this year. So it went for like 3 years of a book.
So, before we start, how many of us, obviously Nick loves Scooby-Doo, how many of us have experience with Scooby-Doo, have watched it?
It depends what you mean by like experience, because I feel like it's always I've seen Scooby-Doo episodes, but everything's been peripheral. Like I even watched the Scooby-Doo live action movie, but it's like I've retained nothing from it.
I won't hold it against you.
I liked Scooby-Doo as a kid, but my brother was like a huge Scooby-Doo fan. So like that's when I got like more into it.
What am I talking to you for?
Yeah, seriously.
But I've watched a lot of the old Scooby-Doo stuff, and like I've seen like at least some of every iteration of the TV show. Like I really liked Mystery Incorporated, and like so like I know the archetypes, but I don't know like the lore as much. But
There's
I
not
certainly
much.
like
Is there lore?
There is,
No,
but not much.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, like, I couldn't tell you, like, what years the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo were on, or, like, which time Don Knotts was there. But, like, I have, I have an idea, like, overarching idea.
Yeah.
This sounds like
that's kinda how I am,
craziness
too.
to me. All I know
I'm
is
like-
Harlem Globetrotters. That's my lore.
I kind of was the same where I saw some episodes as a kid, but I didn't have a sibling that loved Scooby-Doo. So I really just saw some episodes as a kid, and I had the Super Nintendo Scooby-Doo game,
I have that too.
Oh.
which it was really hard as a kid. It was really fucking hard.
Dude, I tried playing it like a few months ago, and it's still hard because like
Yeah.
the internet didn't exist back then, so there's not
Yeah.
like strategy guides,
Scooby-Doo's also for adults, guys. Nick
Yeah,
still is
I
not
keep
an
telling
adult.
keep telling me that.
I had Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chasers for Game Boy Advance.
Ooh, another
and,
good one.
Some GameCube game. There's a cemetery on the cover.
Night of 100
but
Frights.
Yeah, that's it.
This
I got
comic
you.
is nothing like that because this is like a reboot, right? Because
Yeah,
none
it's
of
a
these
Great
characters
reboot.
know each other and they meet up in this comic, so it kind of gives you like everyone's background and how they formed the I don't even know what they're
so
called.
this
the
is
gang.
very much.
Mystery Incorporated.
So this is very much like the Flintstones, where it's like not anything to do with any of the previous continuity, and it's like it's this new world that is very clearly not the same world from Scooby-Doo. So Nick, now I just want to ask you, because you on your other show, Limited Cell, talk about Hanna-Barbera cartoons. So did you come to Scooby-Doo later, or have you always been a huge Scooby-Doo guy?
It's always been Scooby-Doo, and it's harbored some hatred in my brother. He hates Scooby-Doo because when I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something, we'd be home during summer break, and I'd always turn on Scooby-Doo, and he said he'd just hear like the bat squealing in the theme song and just like have to leave the room because he was so sick of it.
Wow.
So it's been
Lifelong love.
yeah. One of my earliest memories is like sitting down after like preschool one day and watching Scooby-Doo, and I remember it was the episode with the 10,000-volt ghost. One of my earliest memories, so it's deeply ingrained. I wasn't joking about it consuming my personality.
So I don't know if he's actually going to be a replacement Sly, because as Sly said to me the other day, Hanna-Barbera fucking hated Scooby-Doo, and Scooby-Doo is shit.
I was there. I can't confirm this because Sly was talking about how Scooby-Doo was so successful at Hanna-Barbera they had to keep like pivoting the entire company around.
Oh,
it.
I don't disagree. There's been 1,000, and actually, one of the DC meets Hanna-Barbera had the Funky Phantom, which was like a carbon copy of this. There was even like Josie and the
He mentioned
Pussycats.
the shark. He mentioned the shark.
Jabberjaw?
one?
Jabberjaw. that was an
Jabberjaw. He's like
Aquaman.
Jabberjaw was supposed to be like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've done like 20, and I'm not exaggerating. There's a list someone shared with me on Facebook of all of the Hanna-Barbera carbon copies of Scooby-Doo. So,
There's
but
a lot.
Scooby-Doo is the best.
Now, do you know any of the like how Scooby-Doo's history in comic books at all?
I don't actually. I know that they were with like a lot of the Hanna-Barbera properties. They had like a short series through Golden Key.
Yeah.
Maybe like 40 or 50 of those.
But like as I'm not super familiar, so like from what I've seen, they've always been like kids books until this, right?
Yeah, they always have. I think maybe the closest they've gotten to like an actual comic book is the team ups that they do, where they've brought in like Batman and stuff, but it's still like
It's still like Adam West Batman.
Yes,
and, like,
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So this
So-
is not your daddy's Scooby-Doo.
Not your daddy's Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
So the one thing that the little lore that I want to give real quick is on the creative team, because when DC announced that they were going to do these Hanna-Barbera books, a lot of them were like the Flintstones book was Mark Russell, who was like pretty much an unknown at the time. Like, and there was a lot of like, there wasn't any creative teams that really like grabbed me, but this is written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, who wrote my favorite comic book of all time, and which is Justice League International, and they are a team that has kind of never been like an A-list team, but they have like a lot of cult status. So like I was very excited to see them on this book, and I'm sure that you guys are gonna bring it up a lot. They're a very dialogue heavy team that
Really?
uses
Could've
lots
fooled
and
me.
lots of quips.
They hide it really well.
Yeah, in the giant word bubbles that cover half the page.
Take up the whole panel. Yeah.
The way that a lot of their work is Keith Giffen does all the plots and DeMatteis does all the dialogue. And what they do is they usually write more character-driven books that are less plot-heavy and more just like a bunch of characters coming together and like exploring their interpersonal relationships. I will say this is not I don't think this is the best example of Giffen DeMatteis' strengths, but that you get an idea for their style, that it's very wordy, but a lot of like characters talking about how they feel about stuff.
I thought it was
A lot.
bizarre, but like in an interesting way that there was a plotter and a dialogue writer for this.
Yeah.
I was trying to think. It's like, have we covered anything else that's been like that?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think we have.
Yeah, it was very unique. It's one of those things. Again, I can't tell you who's responsible for what really here,
Yeah.
other than maybe the dialogue guy being.
And that's one thing, Giffen DeMatteis work together so frequently, and most of their works are so entwined that, like, what's interesting is even though DeMatteis does the dialogue, when he's on his own, he's usually a lot more, like, philosophical than quippy. So, like, I think it's them together that they bring out the, like, comedy side of the two of them. And the only other thing I want to mention is Howard Porter does most of the art. There's a little bit from Dale Eaglesham and Wellington Alves and Scott Hanna, but the vast majority is Howard Porter, and Howard Porter is somebody whose style is very weird, but he was part of the Grant Morrison Justice League relaunch in the 90s that like brought DC back from like the brink of nobody giving a shit about them, and he's done a lot of big team books, and seeing him put on Scooby-Doo was, when they first announced it, I was like, this is a very interesting and like ambitious choice for the team, because I expected it to be like nobody's, and it's like, no, these are like big DC people.
Was real quick, was Afterlife with Archie, was that before this? I was gonna say, if you're like, we're doing apocalyptic Scooby-Doo and anti-Cap Flintstones and like Afterlife, like if Afterlife with Archie came out before this, then I'd be like, okay, this can work. You can take an established like kind of campy franchise and try.
Afterlife with Archie was about 3 years earlier.
Okay, all right. Because I was like, that's an interesting choice, but it's like, I think it's worth a shot after seeing the success of Afterlife with Archie.
And one thing same thing with Afterlife with Archie, a lot of these kind of spin-off books, one of the problems that we see with them, like these like not mainstream like DC books, but like we'll see a lot of, when you put creative teams on them, it'll kind of be their side gig, and because of that, you'll have lots and lots of delays. And like, for example, volume 2 of Afterlife with Archie has not come out yet, and volume 1 came out, the book started 6 years ago. Whereas Scooby Apocalypse just released its 36th issue to end the book. Like, that was like, it was an actual ongoing that DC like stuck with for years, which is like kind of unexpected.
And I could be wrong here, because I was just reading comments on the subreddit, but I don't even think that it was necessarily canceled. It's just that they kind of ran out of ideas.
Yeah, I think they told their like whole story that they wanted to tell. But I'm trade waiting, so I haven't read the end, so I don't know. Yeah. But that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
So, Nick, you read all of this?
I have not read all of it. Don't hurt me. Here's the thing. I've read the first maybe 3 volumes probably 5 times just to get caught up to new issues coming out, and then I would forget about them for forever. And that's where I'm at right now. And the
is
first
there one
volume,
more volume coming out? Like, you only have like 8 issues left to read?
I have a few. I don't.
He doesn't want to admit it.
Yeah, I have. I want to say.
I mean,
like
I'm
10 issues,
not
maybe.
judging you for that.
Yeah, no,
You claim you're a Scooby-Doo fan. How dare you?
I know. I just don't have time. I'm too busy talking about it on my other podcast and watching it. But the first volume is a little. I'm gonna jump ahead. It's a little hard to get through. So every time I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting stuck in the mud before it finally picks up. So eventually, I'm just like worn out, and I have to give myself a break.
That was one thing, rereading it, and we'll get into it in a second, but rereading it, because I really like this book, rereading it, I was like, wow, the first trade doesn't really have a whole lot happen in it, does it?
Right.
No,
right, exactly.
No, it doesn't.
But somehow it feels like it goes on forever, and yet, in the end, you're like, okay.
I think that can all be attributed to Daphne's character in this whole 6 issues.
Potentially.
Now is as good a time as any to start getting into it. So we will be covering the first 6 issues. And the book opens with issue 1, Paris, 1 year ago. And it's Velma spreading some weird green stuff all over Paris, basically looking down.
It looks like green, like hatch marked circles. It's like technological. It's not just like, she's dribbling green stuff on Paris.
It looks like the picture of the Black Star, but green.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Or not the Black Star, the black hole. Oh my god, I'm an idiot. The picture of the black hole.
Of the black hole,
but green.
Yeah, it's just it's a circle.
So, and she, like Rorschach in Watchmen, opens it by looking down at the people, calling them scum and idiots. And we're in this like weird festival.
It's Burning Man.
Yeah,
it's like a fake version of Burning Man.
Yeah, but it's like, so that's this framing device from a year ago. Now
it's really weird. It's not just like Burning Man. You got like people with like these crazy technological, because this is kind of like in the future, so they got these like glowing orb plants around. You got like 2 statue babies hugging.
Yeah, it's Burning Man, but like set like Darryl said, Howard Porter does a lot of like sci-fi looking designs. A lot of his work is set like in the future, kind of framing stuff that looks just lots of bright shades and cubes and statues.
I like it.
I like Howard Porter's art a lot.
Hi-Fi's color in particular, they're the
Yes.
colorist,
Oh, yeah.
is really good. That was one of the most striking things to me reading this, is that the colors are very bright in this. Whereas like the subject material in this book, it gets dark at times, like really dark, but it continues to keep like all the main cast of Scooby-Doo, like all of their clothes are still very bright and like their colors. You don't get any kind of muted colors even when they're like in a dark area.
Yeah. And we meet the first two members of Mystery Incorporated, Daphne and Fred, where Daphne is...
It's not Mystery Incorporated anymore. It's just these two guys hanging out.
Two guys. And there's a lot of this is doled out like slowly over time, but like the general premise of Daphne is she was a reporter for the Washington Post, but felt like fake news, mainstream news, whatever, was not doing enough hard-hitting journalism. She wanted to go into more like the gritty underworld and ended up with a like public access show where she tries to solve like unsolved mysteries. And
Mysterious
Fred is
mysteries.
Yes, mysterious mysteries. And Fred is her always pining after her cameraman.
They met in like, what was it,
In
college?
Yeah.
He wanted to be a film guy too, but he wanted to do like Hollywood schlock, and she was like, I want to do exposés. And he's like, all right, I guess I'll follow you to do that.
Yeah. And she used to be a very popular reporter, and now she's basically like a complete like has been on some like random show at 4:00 in the morning.
On the Knitting Channel.
Yes, on the
She's
knitting.
washed up, and she's here because she got a tip from an informant
An
about
anonymous,
a big
whistleblower.
Yes,
Yeah.
a whistleblower. And we, at the same festival, which is like nearby this complex that this guy and his dog work at, we have Shaggy and Scooby.
It's not his dog, is the thing.
It's so Shaggy is walking this dog who's Scooby, and he looks like Scooby-Doo, and they're from this complex where it's like a high-tech private government contracted like, you know, super sci-fi place, and Scooby is one of the dogs that was experimented on, and that's why he can talk but in his broken Scooby-Doo language. And Shaggy is and Shaggy is the dog trainer there, and he wanted to give Scoob a night out, so they're like touring. He snuck him out so they could tour Burning Man.
He also, because he's like this prototype like smart dog, but he was the first one, so that's why he speaks like that. But in the first few panels, he puts on these glasses onto Scooby,
Emoda goggles.
And you, as Scooby feels things, you get like thumbs up and like smiling emojis or like pizza emojis,
Fries, ice cream,
Yeah. And, like, as you can expect from any Shaggy Scooby story, they're very hungry and they're looking for things to eat. And then we cut into the complex where we meet Velma, who is one of the scientists there. And she
seems to be a head honcho, right?
Yeah, she's a head honcho, and there's a security guard going like, you know, Shaggy's always, sneaking out. We need to send a team. And she's like, that'll just draw attention to us. They'll come back. Just don't worry about it. Let them... go out there.
And we'll fire him later.
And we'll fire him later. Yeah. So then the whistleblower so it cuts back to Fred and Daphne, and the whistleblower that they're waiting for is Velma. Fred gets scared and throws the camera at Velma
face. Comes out like a rock opens up. It's like a secret hatch, and Velma comes out, and Fred gets scared, and he shouts, "Mole people!" and he chucks his camera at her, and it knocks her out.
They also do some like stuff like when stuff doesn't make sense. The comic will reference it, like Velma's monologuing in the secret facility, like, I have to be a whistleblower to save the world. And then she's like, why am I saying this in a facility that has, like, cameras everywhere?
Yep.
And they move on. They're like, it's okay. She has to monologue.
Yeah. And, Daphne's, like, making fun of Fred for the mole people, and it's, like, pretty clear that her show is basically Scooby-Doo, where, like, they find paranormal things, and it's always just, like, some scam. And...
Well, here's what I was I've been trying to look this up for a really long time, because in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, which was one of the...
He is Sly's doing the deep lore dive.
Well, I was trying to figure out, because in that movie, she has a TV show where she goes around with Fred across the country to find... She's trying to find real haunted places, and I can't remember the name of it, and I thought it was something like Mysterious Mysteries, but I don't think it is. I think it's something coast to coast.
This was a live action movie, or
this was an animated movie in, let me get the year, I think it was 1998. 1998. It was part of 4 movies that they came out with after like a huge lull and not having any Scooby-Doo. they came out with Zombie Island, and it was the first time they had a movie with real monsters. And
I
then,
remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was The Witch's Curse and Cyber Boys,
Chasers.
Cyber Chase, and
I remember that.
Space Invaders.
I think I remember it too because it was the first time that they were using real monsters, which was like that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and then like Space Invaders, there's real aliens and stuff like that, real witches. So I believe this was the first one in that run, and it was kind of gritty. It was
So there is
close
some
to
precedent
this.
for Daphne and Fred to having a TV show.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So Nick, when you were reading this, do you remember the first time you were reading this? Were you like, "Oh, this is great to see all these characters like this," or were you like, "This doesn't seem like..." Because Velma, to me, seemed like a character that was. I mean, again, I don't have a lot of Scooby-Doo lore, but she's a very antisocial to the point where it's like it's a problem that she can't communicate or interact with people in a normal way, and she doesn't have like any friends, and she even has like she's kind of like the black sheep almost of the group, even though like all of them together don't know each other that well, other than Shaggy, Scooby, Daphne, Fred, but Velma's always seems to be like kind of the odd one out here.
Yeah. So I think that I really liked originally. I like how they pair these together because they kind of took that idea of having a TV show and made it work for this, and also gave a quick origin story of how these people came together. I also like that they gave Daphne a purpose, because in the TV show she never really had a shtick. Like Fred,
she's danger-prone Daphne. She's there to get captured.
and that wasn't even really in the TV show that much. That was more of like later on they decided she needed a quirk. But like Fred was kind of brainy, but he also set the traps, and Velma was the brainy one. Shaggy and Scoob were Shaggy and Scoob, and Daphne didn't really have a thing. And so she's aggressive and she's curious, so they gave her an actual trait. So I think that they made these people real people.
Yeah, if anything, for like people that don't know what happens with this comic, Daphne is 100% kind of like the leader of the group, and she's the one that interacts with people, I would say, like almost the most.
Yeah, she's I feel like she's the focal point for the most part.
Yeah.
Like she takes a lot of the screen time, if you will.
It's both like her and Velma. Honestly.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the two of them. It switches between their perspectives a lot. Shaggy and Scooby are kind of just like doing their own thing half the time, and then Fred is just useless.
Yeah, it's an interesting shift of dynamics, because usually it's Daphne and Fred paired up, and then Velma's off on her own, and now it's mostly like Daphne and Velma, and then Fred's always getting into danger and stuff. But to your point, I like that they took that very small detail from the shows where Velma is kind of the outcast, but not explicitly so, and kind of made it feel like a real person. Just going back to that, like she is totally the outcast in this.
Yeah, because we've talked on Divisive Issues before about sometimes having a character like Sly will get angry. Like if you take one character's like an event or something that's bad about them, like say they were an alcoholic for a bit of time, and then when you do a reboot and then that's the main focus of it, I didn't know whether or not that would be something you would have appreciated.
Yeah, I think sort of. There's a fine line. I think they hit it decently enough. Because in the cartoons they don't have a lot of traits, so giving them anything was better than they were in the cartoons.
Fair. So at this point we see Shaggy and Scooby eating, and then trying to eat some like vegan tomato. I thought tomatoes were vegan.
Yeah, they do a lot of jokes at the expense of hippies in this, and hipsters like throughout all 6 issues, and it's almost like too much for me. Where I'm like, yes, we get it. Like, fucking hippies.
Yeah, this pizza's made out of tofu, cheese, no tomato sauce, and rice crust.
Yeah, completely gluten free. And Shaggy's like, but that's not pizza. I don't know what it is.
That was a really good impression. You could be the next Casey Kasem.
So they never get to eat it because when Velma gets knocked out by Fred, because Scooby has that like eye goggle thing, it syncs to Velma's her special high-tech glasses, and he's viewing Fred and Daphne as a threat, and he runs after to go like save her, and Shaggy follows, has a lot of Scooby-Doo where are you yelling.
Yeah, they have to do that. They only do it twice in all of these 6 issues, so I was kind of happy that they didn't milk that. There's an Easter egg on this page. You see that?
What is it?
The person serving pizza has a Watchman pin.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think at the beginning there's a dog that's supposed to be Dynamite. I don't know if you guys know who Dynamite is.
Yes, I did notice that.
Okay.
Oh my
Anyway,
god.
keep going.
So at this point, one thing that I do really like about it is the team gets together very quickly, and now they're all together, and Velma is the whistleblower that they were meeting with, and she brings them into this complex, and she basically exposits the whole thing that
There's
4...
so much fucking dialogue.
Yeah, over the course of like 2 pages, all I see is white.
Yes, there's a lot of
It's just
exposition.
and she's like, and then we were doing this for this, and our secret plan was this secret government facility, and we were going to spread nanites around the world, and we're going to
And then
reduce the bad traits of humans.
And then Daphne will always cut in and be like, so you were the evil person. And then
Yeah.
Velma's like, no, I wasn't. And then she has to start all over again.
They literally spend like 3 issues of Daphne starting every issue saying, Velma, this is all your fault. And she's
3?
like, it wasn't me.
3?
Yeah.
It's 6. It's the entire volume that's been out.
Yeah,
I was
there is
gonna
a
say
lot of that.
the one thing I wanted to compliment is at least when you're getting an exposition dump by Velma, which is definitely pretty heavy. It does have other people cutting in a lot, which is nice because then it establishes relationship between them.
Yeah.
We're
That's
like,
what I mean
okay.
about the Giffen DiMatteo style. Is like this is it's not a perfect to read example, but it's a good example of how you're immediately establishing character dynamics even during exposition.
Yeah, I didn't feel like a character, even though Fred is mostly useless. He's useless in a charming way. He still participates. He still asks like, "What exactly were you doing here, Doc? What is the point of this?" But I'll get into the Velma and Daphne stuff later. It is really
Basically, Velma exposits that she was part of a secret project, that this was supposed to be a government facility that trains like dogs for the military, but really there was a
That's the
secret
cover.
project going on under it. They wanted to release nanites around the world and then use those nanites to take away people's greed and violence and bad traits and make them more peaceful. But Velma found out that they were actually trying to reduce any kind of aggressive traits to the point where people would become like docile and passive so that they could be ruled by this group of scientists
Called the 4.
and and that's when she wanted to blow the whistle, and she takes them into the safe zone to tell them all this, and they keep interrupting, and then an alarm goes off basically once she's done.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. The alarm goes off, and it seems like the nanites already activated, but it's too early. What's going on? And then we just get this scene of like outside there's like lizard men and werewolves and mummies, like
monster
trying to see if I see
movie
any
type
Easter eggs
monsters,
here.
not just like regular
Yeah.
or like I don't know what regular monsters would be. Monster movie monsters.
Yeah.
So monster movie monsters. And then the issue does end with just a backup of when Shaggy first got hired. He was, all the other dogs were much more advanced and were like picking on Scooby-Doo, and Shaggy like jumped in, and he has like a very high like level of empathy, and like he's like basically like he has like high
It's
animal control.
dog
He has-
empathy.
he says, "I have high canine IQ."
Yeah. But it shows that Shaggy was just like this like kind of hipstery like dumb idiot who couldn't hold jobs anywhere else. Like there's some quick cuts of him like working at like McDonald's or whatever. But he always related more to animals, so he like goes in and protects Scooby-Doo, and that's how they become friends. And issue 2 is pretty much just
we get
them.
I want to back up, sorry, just real fast. We get the first peek at Scrappy-Doo.
Oh,
No,
flashback.
I feel like we get a peek, but the reveal later on is so much better for that.
yes.
Oh, yeah. He's in there though with some other vicious looking dogs.
He's one of the other dogs, the tiny one.
Yep. Oh, so
And-
keep going.
Yeah, so issue 2 is that not a whole lot happens. Basically, just the gang, as they're escaping, they see one of the lower level scientists, and they go to talk to him, and he's like a complete like horrible monster that attacks
Like
them.
2 sets of teeth.
Yeah, and Velma immediately runs away, and then when they meet up again, Daphne's very upset that she's like, you brought us into this, and then you just abandoned us, and she's just like, I'm really scared, but obviously Daphne and Velma don't trust each other, and they see, like, on the security cameras that these monsters have just basically killed, like, everybody, they're killing each other.
So it
they're
looks
eating
like
people.
the majority of people have turned into monster movie monsters, but like some percentage of the population didn't get turned,
Like
and they're
one or
getting
two people.
massacred
Yeah.
by
And
the
eaten.
monsters and eaten. And they do a lot of the like when Velma's running, she yells "Jinkies." Shaggy yells
Jinkies,
"Zoinks."
Yeah.
Daphne yells Jeepers.
And like Phil said, that they point at it like Daphne's like, what does Jinkies, what does that mean? Like when you say that, was that? And then someone else like laughs at Shaggy going zoinks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this comic has a really weird, because when we're talking about them like eating people and stuff, it straddles a really weird line between like the really like gross stuff, but also like presenting it in a non-offensive, like really disgusting way.
It looks kind of like B horror movie to me.
Yeah. And that's what they're trying to go for with the
Yeah.
monsters. It's like green blood and ropey intestines.
I mean,
so.
it's still like it's horrifying, but it's only like because of the colors and because of the fact that Porter draws like blood, but he doesn't draw viscera or guts or intestines and stuff.
Yeah.
It looks like it's still like fine. Like you could imagine like maybe like a 10-year-old reading this, but not being mortified by it, even though there's some serious like there's people are just blown apart and being eaten alive in this comic.
So in that realm of the like weird tone that it walks is at this point someone named Becky, who's just like one of the people who work there, she's now turned into a monster and she's fully speaking and she talks to them and like even remembers Shaggy, and they all have these like assault weapons, and while her and Scooby are fighting, the monster, Becky the monster, Daphne like blows
Becky with
his head
the hair.
apart. Yeah, Becky with the hair. Daphne blows her head apart, and she's, Shaggy's like, that was a human being that you killed, and Daphne's like, no, it was a monster, and then she starts crying, and she's like, it was a human being, and I blew her apart, but like, what the hell else was I supposed to do?
And then she
And there's,
punches
like,
Velma.
Yeah, and then
She just
yeah.
sucks.
Well,
Velma
she
for
said
putting
that
her
she was
into-
gonna punch Velma before, which is like a yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing that I find really interesting about this, and this does continue throughout the series after this, is even though like they're still setting up that like they're all monsters, it still does have a lot of human moments where it's like they have to deal with the trauma that they're going through. It's not just like they're monsters now, we could kill them all, or like they're humans, we can't kill them. They're like, it's necessary for us to kill them, but like we still have to deal with what that means.
Yeah.
Especially because they don't know if there's a way to reverse it. Because if they were stuck permanently, they might feel differently. But Velma seems to hint at the fact that this might be reversible. So if they're killing people, they're not saving those people.
Yeah.
And then they escape through a vent to get away from the monsters, and they find the very secretive tank experiment that they had that they call the
It's like a
mystery
Humvee.
machine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
and-
scientist was working on this super
Yeah.
secret.
It's Shaggy says it's his mystery machine.
What was Casey
they
Kasem
find-
back from the dead?
They find the scientist's body, and he wasn't monsterfied. And
But he had a
Shaggy
pacemaker.
Shaggy mentions that he just got back from sick leave, where they put in a pacemaker. And Velma's like, "Oh, that's interesting. Let's postulate further on this." But they're interrupted by a bunch of monsters showing up, and that's how the issue ends. Is they're cornered in front of the mystery machine.
I want to point out that at this point they think that this monster outbreak is confined to the complex, because this isn't what was supposed to happen with the nanites. The nanites were supposed to make people docile and stuff, but
But we've seen as the audience that
Yes.
Burning Man is also affected.
Issue 3, Terror Incognita, starts with the mystery machine. Now it's obviously a little bit in the future. There's blood and guts all over this thing. They've been vomiting this whole time, running over monsters. And somehow Fred is injured. Scooby-Doo's watching over injured Fred, and we get, like we were saying before, every issue basically opens with Daphne being like, "Your goddamn nanites did this, you bitch!" And then Velma's like, "It wasn't me. I was trying to save the world. I was trying to do a good thing."
Velma's, no one could have predicted this, and then Daphne goes, "You could have. You and those mad scientists at the complex. You spread your damn nanites across the planet, and this insanity is the result." And then
And she calls her Hitler a few
I
times.
don't think I'd have such a problem with this if it didn't happen like 3 times an
Yeah.
issue.
Here's the thing: is I think there's better ways to handle this for sure. But one of the things that I like what they're going for is that Daphne repeatedly says to her, like throughout the whole book, you haven't told us the whole story at all. And like, it's by the end of the first trade, it is very clear that Velma has not.
Oh yeah.
And like she repeatedly is really, really secretive about it. And like, I understand that Daphne, as like the leader, who's like the only really assertive character, I understand why she's like, you have to tell us. But I think it's because they're like always on the run, that they never actually have a confrontation about it.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of like just sniping at her, which does, I understand what they're going for, but it does, like, it's a bit of a slog to read.
The problem is they have to do it because for some reason having a text blurb in the very beginning isn't enough. A lot of it's recapping. So she has to say, you were one of the scientists, this was your fault, and then she has to say, I didn't plan for this specifically to happen. And it's like every issue starts the same way, where it's like, by having Daphne yell at Velma, they establish all the plot points of how they got here and everything. But it makes it seem so both
nothing gets done,
repeated and antagonistic.
So like I go into my personal life a little bit. I've been reading a lot of Spider-Man, like old Spider-Man, and the way that they do it in that is Peter Parker will be like, man, I just can't get Mary Jane out of my mind after the fight we had. And that's all that they say about it. But in
Like
this,
a narration box.
Yeah, and then in this, we spend, what,
6 pages?
At
There's
least.
one, I think it was the next issue I counted. It was like 6 pages. That was like, none of these need
total.
to be here to do this.
Yeah.
Nothing
So
gets
one
done.
of the things not only are DeMatteis and Giffen, they still kind of write in that like early 80s style where they were having overarching plots without necessarily like, you know, with a lot of recap kind of stuff in it. But I also wonder if there's a part of it that was pushed because this was like the beginning of a new like universe. They were creating this Hanna-Barbera universe that like didn't, like, it wasn't like the first issue was like this huge success and everybody was talking about it. I wonder if DC pushed them to do more of, people will be grabbing issues 3 or 4 to see what's going on, but that doesn't mean that there's not like way less clumsy ways to do it. But I just wonder, because it was like the sleeper hit, I wonder if that was pushed on them a little bit.
My as I was reading this again for like the 4th or 5th time, I was like, if that were the case, we're in a digital world now, where in the 80s you need that kind of recap. In this, if I'm like, I don't know what's going on, let me just go back and go to my app and buy another one for $2 because my local comic book doesn't have the backlog.
That's very fair, but for some reason, DC as a company has been very, very slow to like do that kind of thing. Like, they refuse to do a recap page where Marvel has
painful.
done. Yeah.
Having read like so much of this, I feel like you're just thinking about it in two way of like a smarter, forward thinking fashion rather than like how bogged down comics are in this kind of stuff.
Yeah. But even then, like, this is issue 3 of like a brand new story. Like, there's not that much to recap. You don't have to spend 4 pages.
And they spend
It's
so much
pretty
time.
frustrating.
They spend more
pretty
time than
frustrating.
we've talked about them doing it than we've done doing it.
But anyway, sorry.
So we go back to recap to see how Fred got hurt after they yelled at each other. We see that they escaped with the mystery machine. It's like an action sequence. Again, more hippie making fun of, where Shaggy's like, I'm a Buddhist. Well, at least I was for 6 months in high school. And the Buddha says we should have compassion.
Not in love with that.
They shoot the zombies and stuff.
I kind of like these flashbacks they do here and there, where they start they did this like another issue or 2 down the line, where they start off in media res and just like flashback for a couple pages. Kind of like that.
And we get later, we see Fred's okay, and they go and they see the rest of the world is actually hit, or at least they don't know the rest of the world. They know that at least the nearby city and the
Raging
Burning
Man
festival, got hit by the nanites.
Also, one thing to defend why Daphne keeps assaulting Velma about it. Every time something happens, Velma goes, "What have I done?"
Yeah.
So obviously it's her fault.
Well,
Also, Fred got really badly hurt in the escape, and she thinks like, if he dies, it's because of you.
yeah. Well, the other thing that makes Daphne kind of unbearable, at least in these 6 issues, is that she is. I don't even want to say bipolar, because this isn't like bipolar, but she'll immediately like punch Velma and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but this is your fault."
It's like borderline personality disorder.
That's a much better descriptor.
You hit on a thing, because I really was struggling with Daphne, because usually I'm fine with characters that are too like brash for their own good and are very like non-personable, especially if they're women, because it's like it's cool to have a character that's like this, but she bounces back and forth between being very like brash towards Fred, towards Shaggy, towards Velma, and then like
cries.
wanting to be offensive, and then being like, I can't take this, if I lost Fred, I nothing would matter, in between like calling him stupid. I was like, it's actually interesting because just like how they make Velma's actually specifically, she has antisocial problems.
Yeah,
and
she's
get into
aware
her
of it and talks
backstory.
about it.
Yeah, that was like, maybe that's the thing about Daphne, is it isn't just like her being mean or an asshole all the time. Maybe she actually does have BPD, and it just hasn't revealed it to us.
I mean, I read it as she's like terrified and is just like really acting out, and every time
That's what I
she
was thinking,
starts
too.
to be personal with somebody, she covers it up by extra brashness. So like there'll be times where she has like a real moment with Velma where they start to have a breakthrough, and she flips out immediately. And I read it as a defense mechanism, and like I actually really like Daphne's characterization here.
If it was a defense mechanism, I would like it a lot less, because I'm like, this is just like, she's really annoying throughout this. And so, whereas like if this was something she can control, I'd feel a lot more sympathy for her being in this situation, just like how Velma can't communicate well to her friends, or quote unquote friends that she just met here, because she doesn't have a lot of sociable skills.
Yep. And a lot of this is just flashbacking this issue, just driving away, running over guys. They drive into a like gas station, food mart type place.
Yeah.
And
It's literally called Food Mart.
yep. And
Daphne and Velma argue about the plague some more.
I'm like, skip that, skip that. They're getting supplies, and then at the end, we see someone peeking out of the employee, room, and it's a vampire-looking guy. Mm-hmm. So,
Like a
guess he's
Morbius.
gonna get them.
Yeah.
Very riveting.
Well, basically, they load up on snacks and talk about Twinkies, and then Morbius shows up.
Yeah, exactly.
So issue 4, we start out actually with the narrator is actually one of the characters, as opposed to just like them talking. And I think it's Velma, right?
Yeah.
One thing I like is whenever somebody's narrating their bubbles, at least I think the narration boxes are in the color of their outfits.
They
They
are.
usually are, except for one, which was really confusing, where Velma was purple, and I didn't understand why. That's
Probably just a coloring error.
maybe that's in the exposition dump issue of her backstory, but
Oh, yeah, you're right. She is purple there.
yeah,
That must just be an error, because everywhere else it's pretty clear.
Yeah. So we open up again with Velma and Daphne. Except this time, Daphne also found a cool sci-fi laser rifle or something.
yeah. The van is decked out with futuristic weapons, and
Yeah.
Yeah. And we see the vampire looking at Daphne saying, oh, tasty snack, drink her blood. And we see that unlike some of the other monsters, which were just like either talking like kind of evil normal people, or just moaning or whatever, the vampire is talking like a vampire, where he's like, rise, we will,
tear her flesh, pierce her veins, drink her blood, make her one of us.
Yep. So they have another action scene. Scooby also, something we should mention is he, in the flashbacks, was very docile and getting beaten up by the other dogs all the time. But in this new fucked up world, he does jump into action every time they're about to get pounced.
Which is-
Scooby, just jumps on them.
It's very counterintuitive to his character in the show, but
Yeah, and they look at like Daphne even says that she believes that fear is a great motivator, and that's what's pushing Scooby to do this. Because normally he would be docile, but when it comes to like protecting people he cares about,
That's the big thing, is every time someone's in danger, he like jumps in.
Yeah.
And that's like I like that change, because I feel like the whole like, would you do it for a Scooby snack? Maybe wouldn't work super well
No,
in
not
this
really.
kind of world.
in later issues, like beyond these, I kind of feel like it's something to do with the servos. Like when we get to Scrappy and stuff, all the augmentation. I kind of read it like that. Things kind of changed after the cataclysm.
they experimented on him, or after the cataclysm that changed everyone into monsters.
Yeah, because when we get to Scrappy, like his friends can't talk anymore, and Scrappy's changed a little bit. He's become like bloodthirsty. I think that I kind of read it as Scooby has changed
That
a
makes
little bit in
sense.
that regard, but that's
So
for
they
later.
have this big vampire fight scene. Velma uses a drone. They
Velma
shoot
uses
them.
a drone with like a controller.
Yeah. So it looks like they're regenerating.
they blast him in
and-
half.
Yeah, and they're like it's weird that these are like actual classic literary vampires, and all of the other creatures we've seen have been like, monster movie monsters. And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, that's weird. Wish we could investigate, but we got to get out of here. So they drive away, and they argue for so
Again.
long.
Yeah, they argue a lot.
Well, we get a little bit of progress here because Daphne starts to say she left her research notes at the complex, but if she can get to like a laptop, then she can
Oh yeah.
hack into the...
Apparently, this was not the only secret government facility on this project. The secondary ones around the world, and she's like, if I can contact them, I can see if they've survived, if we can figure out a solution, blah, blah,
And
blah.
Daphne keeps saying like, but they caused this, and she's like, yeah, like, and Velma's like, yeah, but like they might be the only ones to stop it, so we kind of like have to deal with it. And this is when it's like really clear that Daphne's like, you have to explain it all, and Velma's like, no.
Yeah,
Yep.
but we get a taste of that there definitely is something more than Velma's leading.
Yeah. And we see now the outside world again. We have gargoyles and mummies and Hulk and ghosts.
Yeah, this
And-
scene, I liked it a lot, seeing it again for this time. There's like a
they
mummy and
don't-
flying ghosts and stuff. It's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's like very monster movie. And the dogs, like Scrappy Doo and the gang, are in the middle of this, and they're like, Scrappy's like, they don't attack us, which is good. But none of the other dogs have their articulation implants anymore. They burned out, like Nick was saying. So Scrappy's the only one who can talk, and he's like, okay, we'll just follow along, and after these monsters kill each other, we'll eat them. And what we need to do is find Velma, because she needs to upgrade our augmentations, because these are eventually going to
Yeah.
burn out.
Yeah.
I want to say here that Scrappy looks just so cute. He's got like this
He
little
does.
tooth sticking out from under his jowls or whatever. He's just so
Yeah.
cute.
He's pretty cute. And yeah, this is when he's like, "Watch your back, Scoobert. Scrappy Doo is coming for you." And they argue more.
They find like a mall mart to hide out at, and they go in. And it's hard to cover a lot of this because, again, you get a lot of the team building and like other people jumping in when they're discussing things. It's just like these first like 5 issues really hammer home where it's like Velma was working there, and then other people are like, but what were you really doing? And she's like, I didn't want to do like anything really bad. And they're like, is that really true? You're trying to change the world. And like it's a lot of back and forth that it's like we've already covered it 2 issues ago, and it keeps happening as we're trying.
We do learn that Shaggy's parents owned a grocery store that was driven out of town by big corporations like Walmart.
And didn't we also learn something about? Oh, that was a way earher about Daphne. We learned that
She grew up on an estate, and
Yeah.
she's been the only one to use firearms.
and her family fortune comes from
Bath?
bath
Soaps?
bath soaps.
Yep, that Shaggy uses on dogs, and she's like, use it on dogs?
But when inside the Walmart, they find this one guy who was not turned into a monster, and he's dead. And Velma's like,
she
let me
reaches
go.
inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Daphne's like, are you desecrating that corpse? She's like, don't worry. And she pulls out a pacemaker. I assume that's what that is. I've never seen a pacemaker.
I don't know. I didn't know what that was, but I also
I
assumed
don't know what that is either.
But
I mean, from context, I assume that's what it was. That he had some sort of like augmentation, which I guess is technically what a pacemaker is.
I didn't put
kept
that
him
2 and 2
from-
together. If she had said like you're reaching like into his chest or for his
It
heart
might
or
not be.
something.
It might just be that he has metal in his body somewhere.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I think
that
they're
could
just
be
trying
it.
to set stuff up.
Yeah,
It looks
because they
like
go
a
into more
ring,
detail
but-
about this later on.
Yeah, because I don't think that's what a pacemaker looks like.
Yeah, I don't know what that's supposed to
A
be.
ring.
And then, and then at the end, they're like, Fred and Shaggy are like, you know what? We're gonna make the best out of this world. Things are about to get better, and we see thousands of like gremlins outside about to
Closing in
attack
on
them.
Yeah.
And that ends issue 4.
Yep, and issue 5 opens. Goddamn, this is.
Are they
this is the
arguing?
one I think.
Let me guess, let me
I
guess,
think
let me
this
guess.
is the one where it was 6 panels of them just recapping by arguing. Especially when Fred's like, "I've never touched a gun until a couple of days ago," and they're like, "These things that are coming in, they used to be humans, so should we be shooting them? Would that be okay?" Like Shaggy's bringing that up. And
Shaggy's like, I was part of every gun control group out there. Now I'm shooting people.
"Yep,
Yeah, I
Ah,
skimmed most of this at
zoinks.
this point. I was like, I'm over it.
And then they're running around, a lot of them like shooting people, and then they finally find Velma and they hide inside of a room and they barricade the door.
Yeah, they go to this back warehouse of the mall mart.
Yep.
We do learn more about the monsters here because once they barricade the doors, they stop and
Stop
she realizes
scratching
that,
at the door trying to get in.
Yeah, so these monsters don't have object permanence. So once you're like away from them, they like don't chase you.
At least
Yeah,
that's
they're
Velma's
like your classic
speculation.
Velma thinks they're kind of like zombies that they just move on instinct. Whatever they hear or see, they go for, and that's it. Unlike what we've seen, the vampires or Becky with the hair.
Yeah.
And so Fred goes to the back door with Scooby to barricade that door, and he stumbles upon this little girl that is talking about how she was always afraid that there's things under the bed, and she's got like glowing green eyes and pink skin, so you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, something's going on.
Yeah,
I like
the monsters
this design,
are real, and
though.
then she like her head splits open, and it's a giant like plant inside that starts attacking them.
Yeah, it's basically like somewhere between Resident Evil 4 and Last of Us,
Yeah.
where the
exactly.
big things come out, but it's a plant, and it starts swallowing Fred. It's kind of I like this. It's like a whole page spread. I really like that.
Yeah, the design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Porter, to me, like, this first trade Porter carries.
Yeah, I liked his art. And so meanwhile, Velma and Scooby jump up on top of the like shelves to try and hide away from the monsters.
Yeah, because once Daphne shot the plant monster, now all the imp demon zombies.
They heard him.
Yeah, they all start
back.
running.
Yeah, and they're looking around for them, and then you get like a whole bunch of like a couple pages where there's no
It's the quiet place.
dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's just them like trying to hide out and not be found.
And well, one of the things that we learn here is as soon as the like demons realize that there's nobody there, they just start immediately fighting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then and they like rip the hell out of a bunch of each other, and then they leave.
We learned that Scooby can climb, okay, because he's a smart dog.
Uh-huh.
Yep,
So-
he's a smart
Yes.
dog. Climbed
Character
good.
development. Yep.
Yep. And then Daphne goes into like a back room, and this is when she's like having an argument with herself about how she keeps yelling at Velma, and then she's like, "What's wrong with me?" She's also scared and confused and doesn't know what she's doing. And she's like, "Maybe it's not about trust. Maybe I just need an outlet for my own fear and confusion." And then she finds the laptop, and when she comes back to deliver it, she throws it at Velma's head.
Chucks it at her
This is why I
melon.
was like, this isn't just like, I'm just like having like, I'm not adapting well. It's like she has problems if she's
Definitely
like
has
throwing
problems.
laptops at people's head right after she says, well, maybe I just need an outlet for my own like fear and confusion.
Her outlet is violence. I think that's pretty clear. This whole book.
She's got issues. I do have a question though. Is there some sort of like modern stigma against thought bubbles? Because all of this could have just been in thought bubbles.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never.
That's actually
you don't see those in
something-
modern comics.
That's
really.
something that I've seen a lot of writers talk about. I'll get a little bit aside real quick. Is like a lot of modern writers complain about how like sometimes they're like literally not allowed to use thought bubbles because they're like viewed as like childish. But like outward narration is dumb when you're by yourself and
Yeah.
sneaking around, and narrative bubbles kind of take you out of it because you assume that they're narrating it from the future.
Yeah.
Usually, like the way that like voiceover works, which means that there's no stakes because they're not going to die if they have time to narrate this later. So like that's something that like just for some reason modern comics like just won't let writers use thought bubbles, and I think it's a detriment to the medium.
I think they should have here where Daphne's talking to herself for what?
I was
I
wondering
agree.
if
4 or
that
5
was
panels.
like, it was kind of like with Velma where she's talking to herself, where it's like it's a way to keep up at least like some modicum of the camp element where back in old
Maybe.
comics you'd have superheroes always constantly talking to themselves, and it's like, why not use thought bubbles?
Yeah.
And here it's like it's doing the same kind of thing where she's just talking to herself.
Yeah.
That's true too.
Yep. And so the last issue 6, is actually, it's all told from the perspective of Velma. It's basically like a big backstory splurge. It's that episode, like when you get to the anime where once it starts with the flashback, you're going to be in there the entire episode.
Yeah.
It's like every other episode of My Hero Academia.
Yep.
And this
Hey,
is...
there's not that much to that.
Yeah, compared to a lot of other shows. Like Naruto has multiple episodes of those in a row.
That's true.
This is where Velma gives her backstory, and this is... You guys said like the purple text boxes might have been miscolored, but I don't think that's because this is on like every page. I think
Yeah.
maybe it could have been a thing where they decided that orange, because it's a warm color, it would be too much for the eyes to read a lot
Oh,
of
okay,
these.
that's fair.
There are these little orange lines in the backgrounds of all these panels that are I guess supposed to tie her flashbacks back to her.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know. I think you're onto
Oh.
something.
No, that makes sense. Like the background, like instead of the white page, it's all black and orange. And also, it's because Velma's the only character in this whole issue. I was never confused on like who's talking.
Right.
Yeah.
But I understand that like up to this point it was color coded, so that is weird. It's just something I didn't notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she gives like her whole backstory. She's like, "Hey, when I was born, I swear I could remember what it was like being born and leaving the womb, and that like my."
She has mentioned earlier in the book that she has an eidetic memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, when I left the womb, basically her mom's a very anxiety-riddled person, and her dad's just like, he's just an asshole. He's like, she's fragile, she's a little runt, the world's gonna devour her.
Well, it seems like he's just like sexist, basically,
because he says just like you to the wife.
Yeah, and he's got 4 sons, who are fine. Like he has no problem with them. So I don't know.
Yeah, he's also a campaign manager for 3 congressmen, 2 senators, and a failed presidential candidate.
Yeah.
So she grows up, and like her brothers, she calls them the Four, which is also what she calls the lead scientist at that place.
Are we getting to the twist?
She also earlier in issue 1 was like the five. I mean the four.
So
I don't know why I know all of this stuff about them, but I am definitely not part of them. But from issue 1,
that's why I think Daphne's right to be shitty the whole time because Velma's such an asshole.
and it's like
it's not her
issue
fault
1,
though,
she's doing it.
kinda. I mean, it is her fault causing this, but so. I was just thinking, would Ryan say that he was friends with me, Sly, and Phil if we caused the apocalypse? Divisive issues, those guys. I wasn't on that podcast. So she gives her sort of basically as she's growing up and stuff, she was always alone. She just retreated more into herself because she was resented for her intelligence and ridiculed for her social awkwardness. And she started to like really loathe and detest everyone for like pushing her more and more inside of herself.
Yeah, and like
Just a lot of scenes of this.
She made another like scrawny, like really smart, nerdy friend, and then one summer she like blossomed, as they say, and then like. All of a sudden, Velma couldn't relate to her at all and, like, lashed out and, like, basically told everyone in the school to fuck off. And, like, it's just, like, how everyone else, even when they're together, like, even when they're on the same level, when they develop at all, she can't keep up
She
with
wasn't
them.
just telling them off. She was also, like, you act like you're so smart, so superior, but next to me, you're brain dead. She was also, like, being like, I'm so smart. I'm smarter than everyone.
Yeah.
Which is good.
But it's like a mix of social anxiety and ego that I find really interesting.
Yeah, which I like because a lot of times you get stories of just like everyone's mean to this one person and they're like, leave me alone, and they run away and like people yell at them. But I like that Velma's thing is that it isn't just that she's socially anxious, but she also does think that she's better than everyone else.
Well, I like this moment because there's a moment of inner conflict where she's like, yes, I am smarter, but I shouldn't have said that, and so she's like having
and
this
everyone
conflict
else,
with
she
herself.
realized that she didn't hurt everyone in return. She only hurt the one friend she had made by yelling that.
Yeah.
And then her father takes her home, and embarrassed by her, he decides to homeschool her instead. Well, she convinces him of that too. And then she goes to like the South Pole to do
for
research.
like a research thing.
Yeah, and she
can't
can't
handle that.
She breaks there because then that's way too much loneliness. You can't interact with anyone there.
But the thing that I really like about it is she goes there for 4 years, and she's like, I was studying the coldness of space, the light of distant stars, and everything was fine until it wasn't. And it's her just sitting in the dark crying. And like, I really like the idea of like every time she does something, it's fine until she just breaks and it's not fine anymore. And like, I really like that analysis of anxiety where it's not like, in a lot of comics, you'll see characters with anxiety that just have anxiety the whole time until they break through it. And I like that, like, she has years where it's fine, and then it's just not.
Yeah, these characters feel like real people, which is good.
And then she ends up meeting the Four, her brothers.
Show up when she's at like a rest home.
Yeah,
She's like, Dad
getting
never
help.
visits, but the Four arrive, and they're like, now they're all older. One of them's like in the military, one's in politics, one's like works for the CIA, one's a scientist, and they're like, hey, we need your help. We have an idea for this complex where we can take private sector and government resources and make an organization that can make the world better.
And we'll be the Five.
Yeah.
It's kind of heartbreaking because she finally has a smile on her face when they say we'll be the Five, and it's like, damn it, they played her like a fiddle, and you know exactly what's gonna happen.
Because she found her acceptance in everything, and this is when she finally feels like she has a place, and she has like a nightmare about like movie monsters and stuff. And that's when she tells him, it's like, hey, this is how Project Elysium, which is what this is gonna work, is we just get rid of their
bad emotion, bad impulses.
Yeah, their aggression.
And so it was her idea to put these nanites in people.
And I really like the idea of someone who's always felt like an outcast and like can't fit in with people. I like the idea of, why don't we just make people not so shitty?
Yep.
And like I find that to be a really interesting, like, obviously it's not a moral like good thing,
And
but
it works well with her condescension too, where she's just like,
exactly.
Everyone else just needs to like be fixed of their problems, their bad stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. And while she lays this out to her brothers, she's like, flushed, trembling, I waited for their response. Would they reject me? Would they laugh? And they clap, and it was like the happiest moment of her entire life.
She finally got accepted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then that's when we see her on the balcony in Paris, and this is when she lets out the green black holes all over everywhere.
Yes.
And
they're just circles.
Yep. And then she discovers that the brothers had altered the work about weeding out humankind's negative impulses and instead breeding the kind of passivity that allow people to be easily controlled. And that's when she decided to contact Daphne.
And she contacts Daphne because she's like, I need to pick someone who is off the radar. 'Cause she's like, if I went to the New York Times or something, they would know right away.
Yeah, there's connections to her brothers.
Yeah, the complex has eyes everywhere.
The thing that I really like is she doesn't call Daphne to save the world. She calls Daphne to punish her brothers for their betrayal, lash out at them for hurting me, just as I'd once lashed out at Madeline, my friend. Was that petty of me? Perhaps. Did it make my task any less urgent? No. So like even her like whistleblowing like heel turn is because she still like just wants to punish people who didn't accept her.
Yeah.
Not because she like all of a sudden was like, oh no, what we did was wrong. And like I think that leads into why nobody trusts her.
And the issue ends restating that point, hitting it home, because Scooby-Doo comes over to just check up on her because he's just a pure, kind-hearted dog. And she yells at him. She's like, did Daphne send you to spy on me? She doesn't trust me. She never did. None of you trust me. None of you like me. She says, I don't care. Get out of here. She sends him away and starts crying and says, leave me alone.
Yeah.
It's kind of
How does these really end with this?
So there's another back.
Oh yeah, I forgot because I was like reading this. I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? But it's Scrappy Doo looking over, just being like, all these dogs are dumb, but me. These humans are getting ripped apart by the monsters. But it's like, they deserve it. It doesn't matter.
He's like, they were trying to make us military slaves, so they can die.
Well, he says that there was like some experiment put in him, but he starts like scratching himself with his back leg, and he's like, well, shit, my inner instincts are coming out, my augmentations are failing, so I really need to find Daphne.
Yeah, so just before the complex went down, they implanted an array of experimental tech in me. Never had a chance to try it out. Guess now's as good a time as any. And he like activates all this big tech, and it makes him this big buff dog. It says, let me at him.
Yeah.
Let me at him.
But he's like giant, like
totally ripped
dog.
Yeah, we call that puppy power.
Oh, come on. Come on, that's pretty good. I think he does say that in a later issue.
I think he does.
Definitely. Why not?
And he's like, I'm gonna kill Scooby-Doo. Let me at him.
Yeah.
What a good twist. Scrappy's super annoying, always looking up to his uncle, and now he's like, let me murder him.
Yeah, there's a lot of hate of Scrappy out there. This is, the second time he's become a villain, so I kind of feel bad for him. Yeah. The first live-action movie, he was the... Spoilers for the live-action.
Don't you fucking dare.
No! I'm blocking my ears, even though I saw it and forgot everything about it.
Yeah, he was the main villain. He was...
Yeah.
Which, there was a time in my life where I also hated Scrappy-Doo, but that time is over.
You've come around.
I've come around.
From 3 years old to 25.
Yeah.
So on the reread, I felt the same way as you guys, that I was like, God, there's a lot of extra dialogue. This is a slog. But by the last issue, I realized like what I really like about the series and like what they get into more later on with the characters and stuff. Like I think putting the Velma issue in the first trade was a very smart move, because I think it gives you a lot more insight into like the strength of the team rather than the weaknesses that we see a lot of early on.
Yeah.
But so obviously I continued reading this and Nick continued reading this. But so I have to ask you guys our usual question. Would you read more of this, Phil?
No. I I like if you guys really wanted me to, I would, but I didn't really enjoy reading it that much. Even though I can take a step back and be like, it does a lot of good things.
Yeah.
It just felt for me most of the time they're driving around shooting monsters for 6 issues and being like, "Fuck you for doing this." And like I understand, I guess the appeal is these interpersonal relationships, but I wasn't like so hooked by them that I'm like, I have to keep reading. I'm like, cool, they took Scooby-Doo and they tried to make him dark. That's great.
Yeah, we had talked to, like, when we were talking to Sly about this, he's like, I'm glad that you guys are doing this because I don't care about Scooby-Doo. And we're like, we don't care about it. And he's like, don't you guys like apocalypse stories? And we're like, no. Like, we had zero interest. I did warm up to this, especially by, like, the last one with the Velma. I'm like, there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces here. The problem is I'm just like, it took a long time to get started. And I, like, maybe some good things will happen. Like, I was saying, like, I really like that idea of Daphne having some kind of disorder or, like, personality issue. Mm-hmm. But, again, like, if that doesn't, like, come about, like, that isn't a thing, they don't address it or they don't talk about it, then I'm like, I'd rather just not read this then. If she's just really mean off and on for no reason.
Yeah.
Well, she's going through a stressful situation.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Give it
Shaggy's
a break,
going
man.
through stressful. He's puking his guts out, but he's not, like, intrinsically violent and stuff.
Yeah, I will say that it does get better, but it does take a long time to get there.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I'll read anything with Giffen DeMatteis' name on it, even if it takes forever to get there. But that's just like, they've like earned, you know, like when you have creative teams you really love, even when they're at their weakest, you still like see the part that drew you to them in the first place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's definitely, like, well written. My thing is, it just, I never... If you don't like Scooby-Doo, and you don't like apocalypse stories, and you don't find the dialogue that interesting, except when it hits, when it has moments of heart, it would be hard to, like, keep going through this, especially when you don't like reading.
Yeah. There's a lot.
So Nick, as the Scooby-Doo fan, how do you think that this, like, does a disservice to the Scooby-Doo, like, brand, or do you think it, like, pushes it in a unique way?
I think that it temporarily pushes it in a unique way, because I think that a lot of people have asked for a gritty Scooby-Doo, like Riverdale or something, and we got this, and the book, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Meddling Kids is basically like a gritty Scooby-Doo, but it's not Scooby-Doo. It's like copyright adjacent characters.
Gotcha.
And I think that this is the closest we'll ever get, and I think that they do probably the best that anyone probably could do with it. Because whenever I think about Scooby-Doo a lot, just understand that before I say what I'm about to say, is that I try to think of how you would make an original story of Scooby-Doo from the ground up, because they don't have a consistent villain like many other stories do. So you can't just be like, oh, well, here's this villain for the entire trade paperback is the Creeper. Like, no one's going to give a shit. I feel like this is... a good way to go, and I think that from kind of my experience interacting with what I will refer to as the community of Scooby-Doo enthusiasts, is that a lot of people were turned away from this at the beginning because it was not your dad's Scooby-Doo, and it's another apocalypse story, as if we haven't had enough of those at this point. But I think that, all that being said, that this is one of the few directions that it could have gone and been a good story to tell.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Nick, because as I was reading this, I was trying to compare it. It's like, does a gritty reboot of Scooby-Doo work? Because I was like, why would it be in the apocalypse? And then I realized there is actually a lot of horror in Scooby-Doo. Like, Shaggy and Scooby spend most of the episodes, like, running away, being afraid and stuff. So it's like, oh, it makes sense. But I feel like one of the big things that's really missing is the kind of, like, slice of life, just, like, mystery aspect. Like, who could have done it? How do we, like, trap this person? And
that's very fair.
The only mystery really is, like, why are they monsters? But you don't get, like, a who did this or...
Yeah, I think that they tried to do that with Velma a little bit. I don't think that it was as forward as it should have been, I guess, because there is a little bit of mystery there, but it doesn't revolve around that. It revolves around them running away from monsters more than it does the mystery.
That's so interesting of an analysis, because I was going to ask Nick earlier, like, well, or not even ask as much as like comment on that. I really like what you said about how like at the beginning you were saying how like a lot of these characters are kind of like blank slate characters that have maybe one trait or two traits. So like how do you expand upon the core of the character when the core of the character is that like is a redhead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like and like at the same time when you don't have a lot of iconic villains, like where do you when it like gets to the ground basics of this franchise, like what is that? And I thought about it as like I like what they do with the characters and everything, but the core basics is that they're teenagers solving mysteries, and having no mystery in it is definitely like a weird angle to take.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that they like fake a mystery. Like I think that they're just choosing to not go that route, which is that's just like I don't know if it would work better as like a detective story.
Yeah, that's the other, like, if they didn't go this route and they wanted to do something gritty, I'd prefer it if they went like
a noir story.
Yeah, so like back in the original days, what I love about Scooby-Doo Where Are You, which is the first iteration of Scooby-Doo, is that it feels really desolate and desperate, and the set pieces are huge and empty, like they're exploring abandoned airfields or abandoned theme parks. Yeah, so it's
sunken ships.
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
big and empty, and I feel like if they went back to that and they're like exploring an abandoned theme park or something, there's a lot of actual horror and mystery that could be there, which would be more true to Scooby-Doo.
Where here we talk a lot about like the monster designs, but like this is everything is very full.
Yeah.
There's very rarely an empty set piece. That's interesting.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's a criticism that I have of later Scooby-Doos, but that's for a different
This
show.
isn't the show to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, speaking of other shows, we're still in the middle of our Patreon drive. So, Nick, would you like to talk a little bit about some of the things that you do on the Patreon that we probably haven't talked about because we're very vain and selfish and we talk about the things we're involved with?
Sure. So for as little as $1 a month toward our Patreon, you get access to exclusive live streams, which usually is me, but anyone can show up. Like a couple months ago, Ryan showed up and we talked about comics for a very long time and talked about podcasting with Elle. And it was a really good time. And I was sitting there playing video games and talking to Ryan and Elle. So we do that every month, and it's just $1 a month. You get stuff like that on top of many other things, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Yeah. So also at $1 a month, you can also get my monthly music blog has audio versions of the blog with all the music I talk about at the $1 a month level. And at the $5 a month level, you get all the bonus episodes and a bunch of other stuff. And so, yeah, so you should check that out at the patreon.com/flying machine link. I shouldn't have said at the, because it is just that. Or at the flyingmachine.network website. And we have, and also like in our Facebook group, Flying Machine Explorers Guild, you get a lot of updates every time we're doing anything new on the Patreon. That's where you find it. But also, like if you're a patron, you get like emails about all this stuff too. Yeah. So cool. Nick, do you want to also plug your shows while you're here?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to. So over on the network, I have another show called Stranger Still, where me and John talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about things that we find strange or intriguing, or if there's ever a time I'm like, I wonder how that works, then I'll be like, we need to do an episode about it so I can figure out how it works. But
Hey, give some examples.
Yeah, so it's it's anything from, like, we've done conspiracy theories, we've done alternative medicine, but we've also talked about hot button issues like Flint, Michigan, or Planned Parenthood. We've also talked about other nonprofits like PETA and WWF, and anything that we can find kind of a weird hook in. We want to learn more about it. We learn more about it, and we try to make it fun to learn.
And you have a lot of cool guests on sometimes too. Like I remember you have a true crime episode with somebody who's famous that I don't know.
Yeah, we had the captain from True Crime Garage on our show to talk. He has a true crime podcast, but we actually talked about music and horror movies because his side gig is a musician.
Other musicians like Grant Kirkhope, who wrote the Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack.
Yeah, we had Grant Kirkhope on. That was like a freaking dream come true. We've also had Josh Clark on the show to talk about posthumanism. We've had I've been very starstruck many times just having them on our show. So yeah, give it a listen.
Yeah. And also Limited Cell, you talk about Hanna-Barbera cartoons, right?
Yeah, so Limited Cell I do with my dad. It's a generational Hanna-Barbera cartoon review show. So we go through the entire library of Hanna-Barbera cartoons. And
Like you watch them all together?
Yeah, well, yeah, we watch a few because
Okay, I was
there's
like, the
there's a
entire
lot.
library.
Yeah, we watch enough until we have a feel for the show, and then we describe the show and review it on like a scale from 1 to 10 on how good it is. Most of it is crap. Like I
You
said
mean
before.
one to Scooby-Doo?
I wish. Actually, Scooby-Doo, I think I gave it like a 9.25. I didn't even give it a full 10. I feel like
It's the most important thing in my life, but it's not perfect.
yeah, but go listen to the episode. I defend myself very well, I think. Also, in that episode, my dad was hopped up on pain pills because he just had knee surgery. So go listen to that episode.
Sounds
You
like
took
every episode
advantage of
me.
him all hopped up to
Yeah.
get him to agree that Scooby-Doo's a 9.25.
Yeah. But we've also there's some surprise hits in there, like the Buford Files, which is a total ripoff of Scooby-Doo, but we really liked
What the
it.
hell is that?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a purple dog. He's like a purple bloodhound, and he's the weirdest character design ever. But we liked it.
And thank you so much for joining us, Nick.
Yeah, it was
This
a
has
pleasure.
been a lot of fun.
I'll always talk about Scooby-Doo. You kidding me?
Thank you for listening to Divisive Issues. I've been beating Phil and Darryl to death with exposition bubbles.
I've been Becky with the hair.
I've been like the best Shaggy impersonator you've ever heard, man.
And I've been Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Stay in continuity.